Imagine waking up before dawn in ancient Egypt, your back already screaming from yesterday's work, knowing that you're about to spend the next 14 hours dragging 2-ton limestone blocks across the desert, under a sun so merciless it can kill you in hours. And this isn't a temporary job. You'll be doing this every single day for the next 20 years. If you survive that long, you think building the pyramids was some mystical process involving aliens or lost technology? The reality is far more brutal and far more human. These monuments were built by ordinary people using primitive tools, backbreaking labor, and a level of physical endurance that would hospitalize a modern construction worker within hours. Today, we're going to walk through a single day in the life of a pyramid builder during the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Around 2580 BCE, you'll experience the crushing weight of massive stone blocks, the organizational nightmare of coordinating 20,000 workers without modern communication, and the constant threat of death from accidents that were so common they barely merited recording. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why even the strongest modern athlete would collapse within hours of attempting the work that ordinary Egyptian laborers performed daily for decades. You'll discover that the real wonder of the pyramids isn't how they were built, but how human beings survived building them. So settle in for a detailed exploration of one of history's most demanding jobs, as we discover why you absolutely wouldn't last a day building the pyramids. 2. Understand why pyramid construction would destroy a modern person. We must first grasp the staggering scale of what you're attempting to accomplish. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons. The total weight of the structure is roughly 6.5 million tons, equivalent to about 410 modern jumbo jets stacked on top of each. You are Khaemwaset, a 28-year-old farmer from a village along the Nile, conscripted for pyramid duty during the flood season when your agricultural work is impossible, like the other 20,000 men working on this project. You are not a slave. Archaeological evidence has definitively disproven this myth. You are a free Egyptian citizen performing corvée labor, a form of taxation where you pay your debt to Pharaoh Khufu with your body rather than grain or gold. This distinction matters because it explains why you're still alive. Slaves might be worked to death and easily replaced, but free citizens represent an investment that the state cannot afford to waste carelessly. Your survival is economically valuable, which means you receive adequate food, basic medical care, and rest periods designed to keep you functional rather than optimal. The pyramid you're helping to build will stand 481 feet tall when completed, roughly equivalent to a 40-story modern skyscraper. But unlike modern construction, which uses steel frameworks and mechanical cranes, every single block must be quarried, transported, shaped, and positioned using only human muscle, wooden levers, copper tools, and ramps made of mud, brick, and stone. The precision required is almost incomprehensible. The base of the pyramid is level 2 within just 2.1 centimeters across its 230-meter width. The four corners are square to within 1/40th of a degree. The blocks fit together so precisely that you cannot slide a knife blade between them. Accuracy must be maintained while working with tools that would be considered primitive by medieval standards, let alone modern ones. Your workday begins in what modern people would call 4 a.m., though time means nothing to you beyond the position of the sun and stars. The foremen wake the work gangs by shouting and beating wooden staffs against bronze gongs that can be heard across the entire construction site. There is no snooze button, no coffee, no gentle transition from sleep to consciousness. You wake up and immediately begin working, because every minute of daylight is precious and the Pharaoh's deadline is absolute. The first task is the morning meal, which you must prepare and consume within 30 minutes before work begins. This meal consists of bread, onions, garlic, and weak beer, the same food you'll eat twice more today if you're lucky. The bread is coarse and gritty, filled with sand particles that will gradually wear down your teeth until they're ground too. Stumps by age 40. The onions and garlic serve a practical purpose beyond nutrition. They help prevent the dysentery and other diseases that kill more pyramid workers than accidents. The beer is not recreational, but medicinal and practical. The alcohol content is low, perhaps 2 to 3%, but it's high enough to kill many of the waterborne bacteria that would otherwise cause potentially fatal illness. The liquid also provides calories and helps your body cope with the extreme dehydration that comes from working 14 hours under the Egyptian sun. After eating, you report to your work gang for assignment. The pyramid construction is organized with military precision, dividing the workforce into crews of 2,000 men, which are further subdivided into gangs of 200. Then into teams of 10 to 20 workers who perform specific tasks. Your team has been assigned to the ramp construction crew, responsible for building and maintaining the massive earthen ramps that allow workers to drag stone blocks up to the higher levels of the pyramid. These ramps are engineering marvels in their own right. The main ramp is over a mile long, rising at a carefully calculated gradient that allows teams of men to pull massive blocks without the angle becoming too steep for human strength to overcome. The ramp must be constantly maintained and extended. As the pyramid grows taller, requiring the movement of millions of tons of earth, sand, and stone chips, the tools you're given for this work would shock a modern construction worker. Your primary implement is a wooden lever, roughly 6 feet long and made from imported timber that costs more than most people earn in a year. You also receive a copper chisel that must be resharpened several times daily because copper is too soft to maintain an edge against hard stone. Your only measuring devices are knotted ropes and wooden set squares that must be checked constantly for accuracy. The absence of iron tools is crucial too. It's understanding why this work is so punishing. Iron is unknown in Egypt at this time, so every tool is made from copper, wood, or stone. Copper is soft and requires constant maintenance. Wood splits and breaks under stress. Stone tools are heavy and awkward. The efficiency of your work is perhaps 5% of what the same task would achieve with modern steel tools and machinery. But the most challenging aspect isn't the primitive tools, it's the coordination required to make 20,000 men work together without modern communication systems. There are no radios, no bullhorns, no written work orders that can be quickly distributed. Instructions must be shouted from person to person across the worksite, leading to constant miscommunication, delays, and dangerous mistakes. The pyramid site resembles a controlled form of chaos. Thousands of men are simultaneously quarrying blocks, dragging them across the desert, hauling them up ramps, and positioning them with precision measured in millimeters. Teams must coordinate their movements perfectly to avoid catastrophic accidents. But they're operating on verbal instructions passed through chains of command that can involve 20 or more people. Your specific assignment today is ramp maintenance, which sounds simple but involves backbreaking labor that would incapacitate most modern people within hours. The ramp surface must be kept smooth and level, requiring you to move tons of sand and stone chips using only wooden shovels and wicker baskets. Every basket holds roughly 30 pounds of material and must be carried by hand to dump sites hundreds of yards away. You will make this trip approximately 150 times before the day ends, carrying a total of over 2 tons of material using only your back, legs, and shoulders. Modern ergonomic studies suggest that this workload would cause severe injury to most contemporary workers within days. But you'll be doing it every day for the next 4 months until the flood season ends and you can return to farming. The sun is now visible above the eastern horizon. and the temperature is already climbing toward the lethal levels that will characterize the middle of your workday. The morning hours from roughly 6 to 10 a.m. by modern reckoning are considered the most productive period because the heat is tolerable, and the workforce is at its strongest after the night's rest. Your team assembles at the base of the main ramp with tools that have been carefully counted and distributed by the foreman. These tools are valuable state property, and losing or breaking one can result in severe punishment, including reduction in food rations or assignment to even more dangerous work details. The wooden shovels are cracked and worn from constant use. The wicker baskets are held together with crude repairs, and the copper chisels are already dull from yesterday's work. The ramp itself is a marvel of engineering that would challenge modern construction teams. It rises at exactly the right angle to allow teams of men to drag multi-ton blocks up to the current construction level, which today stands about 200 feet above the desert floor. The ramp is 100 feet wide to accommodate multiple teams working simultaneously, and its surface must be maintained with obsessive precision to prevent accidents that could kill dozens of workers. Your first task is surveying the overnight damage to the ramp surface. The desert wind has blown sand into the carefully maintained grooves where the wooden rollers run. Temperature changes have caused some of the mud brick retaining walls to crack and shift. The constant traffic of men and blocks has worn ruts and holes that must be filled and leveled before work can begin. The repair process requires precise teamwork that has been developed through months of trial and error. You and your partner begin by scraping accumulated sand from the roller grooves using copper tools that must be constantly resharpened on whetstones. This seems like simple maintenance, but the precision required is extraordinary. Variations of even a few centimeters in the groove depth can cause blocks to shift during transport, potentially crushing workers or destroying hours of careful positioning work. The sand you remove cannot simply be discarded. It must be carefully sifted to separate usable material from debris, then carried to specific locations where it will be mixed with clay and straw to create new mud bricks for ramp construction. Nothing is wasted in pyramid construction because every material must be transported across miles of desert at enormous cost in human labor. As you work, the site around you comes fully alive with activity that would overwhelm modern safety inspectors. Teams of 12 men are dragging limestone blocks, weighing over 5,000 pounds up the ramp, using nothing but rope and human strength. Other crews are using wooden levers to maneuver blocks into precise positions, with tolerances measured in fractions of inches. The sound is deafening, thousands of men shouting instructions, wooden rollers groaning under massive weight, and copper tools striking stone in an endless percussive symphony. The danger level is beyond anything that would be tolerated. In modern construction, men are working within inches of multi-ton blocks that could crush them instantly if control is lost. The ramp surface is slick with sweat, spilled water, and the occasional bloodstain from workers who weren't fast enough to avoid moving stones. Safety equipment is lacking. There are no hard hats, no safety ropes, and no protective clothing. Beyond what workers can improvise from their personal belongings, the organizational system that coordinates this chaos is based on a hierarchy that extends from Pharaoh down to individual workers through dozens of levels of authority. The overall project is supervised by the royal architect, a man whose name will be recorded for eternity alongside Pharaoh's. Below him are regional supervisors who oversee major aspects of construction, quarrying, transport, ramp building, and block placement. Below them are crew chiefs who manage the 2,000-man crews, followed by gang leaders who supervise 200-man groups, and finally team leaders who direct the 10 to 20-man units that perform specific tasks. This hierarchy serves multiple functions beyond simple command and control. It provides a career advancement system that motivates workers to perform efficiently and safely. Team leaders who consistently meet quotas may be promoted to gang leaders who might eventually become crew chiefs. This possibility of advancement is one of the few things that makes the brutal work tolerable. The chance that extraordinary performance might lift you and your family out of poverty. The work quotas themselves are precisely calculated based on years of experience with pyramid construction. Your team is expected to maintain 500 linear feet of ramp surface each day, including repairs, leveling, and preparation for the next day's block transport. These quotas are not arbitrary, but are based on careful observation of what teams can accomplish without suffering casualty rates that would disrupt the overall project. Meeting the quota requires sustained physical effort that would challenge modern athletes. You spend the morning hours moving between 40 and 60 pounds of material every few minutes, bending, lifting, carrying, and dumping in an endless cycle that pushes your cardiovascular system to its limits. The work must be performed with precision, because mistakes can cascade into larger problems that affect other teams and delay the overall project. The heat management becomes increasingly critical as the morning progresses. By 9 a.m., the temperature has risen to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the direct sunlight is beginning to create dangerous working conditions. The foremen begin implementing heat protocols that have been developed through bitter experience with worker casualties. Water breaks are scheduled every 30 minutes, but the water itself presents challenges that modern workers never face. It must be carried to the worksite in clay jars by teams of boys too young for construction work. The water is warm, often containing sediment that must be allowed to settle before drinking. There's never enough. Each worker receives perhaps a quart of water every hour, barely sufficient to prevent immediate collapse, but nowhere near enough to maintain optimal hydration. The water distribution system reveals the sophisticated logistics required to keep 20,000 men working in the desert. Water carriers must make constant trips between the Nile and the construction site, a round trip of several miles over rough terrain. The clay jars are heavy when full and fragile when empty. Breaking a water jar is considered a serious offense because it directly threatens the survival of the work crews. As the heat intensifies, you begin to experience the physical degradation that characterizes pyramid construction work. Your hands are bleeding from constant contact with rough stone and splinters from wooden tools. Your back aches from the endless cycle of bending and lifting. Your shoulders are developing raw patches where the carrying baskets rub against your skin. Your feet are swelling inside the simple leather sandals that provide minimal protection against hot sand and sharp stone chips. The pain management techniques available to pyramid workers are primitive, but effective within their limitations. Willow bark tea provides aspirin-like pain relief for workers with access to it. Clay poultices help reduce swelling and inflammation, but mostly, you simply endure because stopping work means losing food rations that your family depends on for survival. The morning quota progress is monitored constantly by gang leaders who mark achievements on wooden tally boards. These boards serve multiple purposes. They track individual team performance, identify crews that may need assistance or disciplinary action, and provide data for planning future work assignments. The record keeping is surprisingly sophisticated, with detailed notation systems that allow supervisors to analyze productivity patterns and optimize work assignments. By 10 a.m., your team has completed approximately 40% of the daily quota, which represents good progress that should allow you to finish before the dangerous heat of midday makes continued work impossible. But good progress in pyramid construction means that you've already performed physical labor equivalent to what most modern construction workers accomplish in a full 8-hour day, and you still have 6 more hours of work ahead of you. The psychological toll of this morning routine is as significant as the physical demands. You're constantly aware that a single mistake, a slipped tool, a misplaced foot, A moment of inattention could result in death or crippling injury. The mental concentration required to work safely under these conditions is exhausting in itself, adding cognitive fatigue to the physical exhaustion that accumulates throughout the day. Yet somehow, thousands of men manage to coordinate their efforts with precision that produces results measurable in millimeters. The blocks being positioned above you on the pyramid are fitting together, with tolerances that won't be equaled in construction until the development of modern precision machinery. This accuracy is achieved through human skill, experience, and a level of focused attention that few modern workers ever need to maintain. As the sun approaches its zenith, the temperature climbs toward levels that transforms pyramid construction from merely brutal work into a survival challenge that kills workers regularly despite elaborate precautions. The desert air shimmers with heat that reaches 130 degrees Fahrenheit in direct sunlight, hot enough to cause third-degree burns on exposed skin and lethal heat. Stroke within minutes for workers who cannot find shade. The limestone blocks themselves become instruments of torture as they absorb and radiate heat that makes them untouchable to bare skin. Workers who accidentally brush against stone surfaces receive instant burns that blister and fester in the unsanitary conditions of the construction site. The metal tools become so hot they must be wrapped in cloth to prevent searing workers' hands. Even the wooden tool handles are painful to touch after minutes of sun exposure. Your work assignment changes dramatically during these peak heat hours. The heavy labor of moving stone and earth becomes impossible to perform safely. So your team is reassigned to precision work that can be done in the limited shade provided by the pyramid's growing shadow. Today, you're working on tool maintenance and preparation of materials for tomorrow's construction. Tasks that require skill and concentration but generate less body heat than the morning's physical labor. The tool maintenance work reveals just how primitive and labor-intensive pyramid construction really is. Each copper chisel in your team's allocation must be resharpened multiple times daily because copper cannot hold an edge against hard limestone. The sharpening process involves hammering the copper against stone anvils to compress and harden the metal, then grinding the edge against abrasive stones until it can cut effectively. This process must be performed with extraordinary care because these tools represent significant economic value. A single copper chisel contains metal worth more than a farmer's monthly income, and the skilled labor required to forge replacement tools makes each implement essentially irreplaceable during the construction season. Damaging tools through careless maintenance can result in punishment that includes reduced food rations or assignment to more dangerous work details. The wooden tools require even more careful maintenance because suitable timber must be imported from distant regions at enormous cost. The wooden levers used to position massive blocks are subjected to stresses that would break inferior wood, so they must be inspected constantly for cracks, splinters, or other damage that could cause catastrophic failure. Repairing wooden tools requires specialized knowledge of joinery techniques and access to precious adhesives made from nitrile products. The tool maintenance work is performed in the narrow band of shade cast by the pyramid itself, but even this limited protection provides only marginal relief from the deadly heat. The stone structure radiates accumulated heat like a massive oven, creating air temperatures that fluctuate between unbearable and lethal. Workers must take turns retreating to slightly cooler areas to prevent heat stroke. But these rest periods are brief because the work must continue regardless of conditions. The water distribution during midday hours becomes a matter of life and death that requires military-style organization and discipline. Each worker receives measured amounts of water at precisely timed intervals, but the quantity is never sufficient to maintain proper hydration under these extreme conditions. You feel constantly thirsty, your skin becomes dry and tight, and your urine turns dark, yellow despite consuming every drop of water you're allocated. The water itself presents additional challenges during the peak heat hours. The clay storage jars become so hot that the water inside reaches temperatures that would be uncomfortable for bathing, let alone drinking. Workers must wait for the water to cool slightly in smaller vessels, losing precious time and increasing the risk of heat-related illness. Some workers attempt to cool water by pouring it between containers, but this wastes liquid that cannot be replaced. The midday heat also creates dangerous working conditions that don't exist during cooler hours. The limestone dust that fills. The air becomes almost unbearable as it heats up and begins to burn workers' lungs and eyes. The sand on the ramp surfaces becomes scorching hot, causing burns through the thin soles of workers' sandals. Metal tools left in direct sunlight become literally untouchable, requiring workers to wait for them to cool or improve our protection using cloth wrappings. The accident rate increases dramatically during these peak heat hours as workers struggle with impaired judgment and reduced physical coordination caused by heat stress. Men collapse from heat stroke with frightening regularity, requiring immediate evacuation to shaded areas where they receive primitive but potentially life-saving medical treatment. The medical care consists primarily of cooling the victim with water, providing shade, and hoping that rest will allow recovery. The more severe heat stroke cases are taken to a medical station, staffed by physicians who serve the construction project full-time. These doctors have developed sophisticated understanding of heat-related illness through bitter experience treating thousands of affected workers. Their treatment methods include submersion in cool water, administration of specific herbal remedies, and careful monitoring of vital signs. Using techniques that won't be formally described in medical literature for thousands of years, the social hierarchy becomes especially apparent during the midday heat as workers with higher status receive better protection from the dangerous conditions. Skilled craftsmen and team leaders work in areas with more shade and better ventilation. Supervisors retreat to specially constructed shelters that provide genuine relief from the heat. Common laborers like yourself must continue working in conditions that would be considered torture by modern standards. The food situation during midday becomes particularly challenging as the extreme heat makes eating difficult while making proper nutrition even more critical for survival. The standard worker diet of bread, onions, and garlic becomes unappetizing in the extreme heat. But workers must force themselves to eat to maintain the energy needed for afternoon work. The bread becomes hard and dry, requiring water to make it edible, but water is too precious to waste on food preparation. The psychological pressure during these heat hours is as dangerous as the physical conditions. Workers must maintain concentration and precision while dealing with heat stress that impairs judgment and coordination. The knowledge that a single mistake could result in death or serious injury creates additional mental strain that compounds the physical exhaustion. Many workers report experiencing hallucinations and confusion during the peak heat hours, making safe work practices even more challenging to maintain. The midday period also reveals the remarkable organizational skills required to keep thousands of workers functioning under extreme conditions. Supervisors must constantly monitor their teams for signs of heat-related illness, adjusting work assignments and rest periods to prevent casualties that could disrupt the overall project. The logistics of providing adequate water, shade, and medical care to 20,000 men in the desert represents a management challenge that would test modern organizational capabilities. Despite these extreme conditions, work continues throughout the midday hours because the construction schedule allows no delays. Pharaoh Khufu expects his pyramid to be completed, according to a timeline that has been calculated based on the available labor force and the seasonal work patterns that govern Egyptian agriculture. Missing deadlines is not an option, because it would disrupt the entire economic and religious system that supports the project. The precision work that continues during these dangerous hours requires skills that take years to develop and maintain. Workers must continue shaping blocks to tolerances, measured in fractions of inches while dealing with heat stress that would incapacitate most modern people. The accuracy achieved under these conditions is one of the most remarkable aspects of pyramid construction. The ability of human beings to maintain extraordinary precision while working under conditions that push the limits of survival. As the sun reaches its absolute peak around what modern people would call noon, the work pace slows to the minimum level that supervisors will tolerate. Workers move like automatons, performing familiar tasks through muscle memory while their conscious minds focus on simply surviving the next few hours. The construction site takes on an almost surreal quality as thousands of men continue working in conditions that seem to defy human endurance. The tool preparation work that occupies much of your midday hours involves creating and maintaining the specialized equipment needed for precision block placement. Wooden wedges must be carved to exact specifications for adjusting block positions. Rope must be braided and tested to ensure it can handle the stress of moving multi-ton loads. Wooden rollers must be inspected and repaired to maintain the smooth surfaces essential for safe block transport. Each of these seemingly simple tasks requires knowledge and skill that has been accumulated through generations of pyramid construction experience. The wooden wedges must be carved from specific types of wood that won't split under pressure. The rope must be made from fibers that have been properly prepared and twisted to maximize strength. The wooden rollers must be shaped and balanced to roll smoothly under massive loads without developing flat spots or other irregularities. The midday heat makes all of this precision work more difficult as tools become harder to handle and materials behave differently under extreme temperature conditions. Wood expands and contracts, changing the tolerances of carefully fitted joints. Rope becomes stiff and difficult to work with. Metal tools become dangerously hot to touch. Workers must adapt their techniques constantly to compensate for these heat-related changes while maintaining the precision that pyramid construction demands. As the sun begins its slow descent from its deadly zenith, the temperature drops from lethal to merely unbearable, allowing work to resume at something approaching normal intensity. The afternoon hours, roughly from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. in modern terms, are considered the most productive period of the day because workers have survived the morning heat exposure while still retaining enough energy for heavy labor before complete exhaustion sets in. Your team reassembles for the afternoon shift with a grim determination that has been forged through months of surviving this daily ordeal. The men around you show the accumulated damage of pyramid construction work, skin darkened and cracked by constant sun exposure, muscles hardened but scarred by countless minor injuries, and eyes that hold the 1,000-yard stare of people who have learned to endure suffering that would break ordinary humans. The afternoon assignment involves the most dangerous and demanding work of the entire day, assisting with the actual placement of limestone blocks on the pyramid itself. This means climbing the ramp system to heights that would challenge modern construction workers equipped with safety gear, carrying tools and materials upgrades that test the limits of human endurance, and working within inches of multi-ton stones that could crush you instantly if something goes wrong. The ramp system you must navigate is a marvel of engineering that represents nearly as much construction effort as the pyramid itself. The main ramp spirals around the pyramid in a complex pattern that allows multiple teams to work simultaneously without interfering with each other. Secondary ramps branch off to provide access to specific areas where precise work is being performed. The entire system must be constantly maintained and modified as the pyramid grows higher and the construction requirements change. Climbing the ramp while carrying the tools and materials needed for block placement would challenge a modern athlete. But you must do it while already exhausted from the morning's work and dehydrated from the midday heat exposure. The grade is carefully calculated to be just shallow enough for teams of men to drag massive blocks, but this means it's steep enough to be genuinely difficult for individual workers. carrying loads up to their own body weight. The tools you must carry include wooden levers up to 8 feet long, bronze crowbars that weigh over 20 pounds each, wooden wedges of various sizes, coils of rope that become heavier as they absorb your sweat, and stone hammers that must be precisely balanced for effective use. The total weight of your personal tool allocation is roughly 60 pounds, and you must carry this load up ramps that rise over 200 feet above the desert floor. The physical demands of this climb would be challenging under ideal conditions, but you're performing it while suffering from the cumulative effects of months of pyramid construction work. Your body fat percentage has dropped to levels that would concern modern physicians. Your joints ache constantly from repetitive stress injuries that have no opportunity to heal. Your cardiovascular system is operating at maximum efficiency, but also maximum stress pushed to limits that few modern people ever experience. The view from the working level of the pyramid reveals the staggering scale of the construction project in ways that aren't apparent from ground level. Thousands of workers are visible across the site, looking like ants from this height, but each representing a human being enduring the same brutal conditions you face daily. The organization required to coordinate this many people performing complex, dangerous tasks simultaneously becomes almost incomprehensible when viewed from this perspective. The actual block placement work requires a combination of brute strength, precise technique, and perfect timing that takes years to master. Each limestone block weighs between 2.5 and 5 tons and must be positioned with accuracy measured in fractions of inches to maintain the geometric precision that makes the pyramid structurally sound. This positioning is accomplished using human muscle power, wooden levers, and coordination techniques that have been refined through decades of trial and error. Your role in the block placement process is to operate one of the wooden levers that will maneuver a 4-ton limestone block into its final position. This lever is 12 feet long and requires 3 men to operate effectively, 1 to position the fulcrum point, 1 to apply pressure at the long end, and 1 to guide the movement and ensure the lever doesn't slip. The coordination required between these 3 workers must be perfect because any mistake could result in the lever snapping, the block shifting catastrophically, or workers being crushed. The technique for operating these levers has been developed through bitter experience, with accidents that killed or maimed workers who made small errors in judgment or timing. The fulcrum point must be positioned exactly right to provide maximum mechanical advantage without creating instability. The pressure must be applied gradually and steadily to avoid sudden movements that could cause loss of control. The movement must be guided carefully to ensure the block travels along the precise path required for proper positioning. The blocks themselves present unique challenges that vary depending on their pretend and specific work that has been performed on them. Some blocks are freshly quarried limestone that still contains moisture and is relatively soft. Others have been aged and hardened by exposure to desert conditions. Some have been roughly shaped at the quarry site, while others require extensive finishing work after placement. Each block must be evaluated individually and handled according to its specific characteristics. The finishing work required after block placement involves techniques that would challenge modern stonemasons equipped with power tools. The blocks must be shaped to fit together with precision that allows no gaps or irregularities. This shaping is accomplished using copper chisels that must be constantly resharpened, stone hammers that require perfect technique to avoid damage, and wooden wedges that can split blocks along predetermined lines if used skillfully. The dust generated by this stonework creates working conditions that would violate every modern safety regulation. Limestone dust fills the air in concentrations that make breathing difficult and vision limited. This dust settles in workers' lungs, causing respiratory problems that worsen over time and eventually kill many long-term pyramid workers. The dust also gets into eyes, ears, and wounds, causing infections and other health problems that the limited medical care available cannot effectively treat. The precision required for this finishing work is extraordinary when considered in the context of the primitive tools and difficult working conditions. Modern analysis of pyramid construction reveals tolerances that weren't achieved again in large-scale construction until the development of precision machinery in the industrial age. This accuracy was accomplished by human workers using hand tools while suffering from heat stress, dehydration, and physical exhaustion that would incapacitate most contemporary people. The teamwork required for effective block placement involves communication systems that must function despite the noise, dust, and physical separation that characterize the work environment. Workers have developed a complex system of hand signals, whistles, and shouted commands that allow coordination of activities involving dozens of people working with multi-ton loads. Miscommunication in this environment can be instantly fatal. So these systems have been refined through generations of construction experience. The afternoon work period also involves constant interaction with the engineering staff who ensure that the construction meets the precise specifications required. For structural integrity and religious significance, these engineers are highly educated men who understand mathematics, astronomy, and architectural principles that won't be formally documented for centuries. They constantly monitor the construction progress, checking measurements and making adjustments to ensure the pyramid will achieve the geometric perfection required by religious law. The religious significance of the precision work becomes apparent during the afternoon hours as the engineers perform ritual measurements and alignments that connect the physical construction to cosmic forces. The pyramid must be aligned precisely, with cardinal directions, specific stars, and other astronomical features that have religious meaning. This alignment requires measurements and calculations that push the limits of Egyptian mathematical knowledge while being implemented by workers who may not understand the theoretical principles involved. The social dynamics during the afternoon work period reveal the complex hierarchy that governs pyramid construction. Skilled workers like yourself receive slightly better treatment and more autonomy than common laborers. But you remain subject to the absolute authority of supervisors, who can assign punishment or rewards based on performance. The possibility of advancement provides motivation to excel. But the consequences of failure include reduced food rations, assignment to more dangerous work, or even expulsion from the project. The accident rate during afternoon work remains dangerously high despite the elaborate precautions that have been developed through experience with pyramid construction. Workers are regularly injured by falling tools, shifting blocks, or equipment failures that occur without warning. The medical response to these accidents is surprisingly sophisticated, with trained physicians and organized evacuation procedures. But the primitive nature of available medical treatment means that many injuries result in permanent disability or death as the afternoon progresses toward evening. The cumulative exhaustion of the workday begins to create conditions that increase the danger for everyone on the site. Workers' concentration wavers, coordination becomes less precise, and judgment errors become more common. Supervisors must balance the need to maintain productivity against the increased risk of accidents that could kill workers and damage the project. The tools and equipment show their own signs of wear as the day progresses. Wooden levers develop stress cracks that could cause catastrophic failure. Ropes stretch and weaken under constant loading. Copper tools become dull and must be resharpened more frequently. This deterioration of equipment adds another layer of danger to work that is already pushing the limits of what human beings can safely accomplish as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, painting the pyramid and surrounding desert in the golden light that makes this landscape famous. Your body has reached a state of exhaustion that would require hospitalization for most modern people. You have been working for over 12 hours, under conditions that would challenge professional athletes, Yet, the day is not over. The evening hours represent the final push to complete daily quotas that cannot be postponed without disrupting the entire construction schedule. The temperature has dropped to merely oppressive levels, perhaps 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which feels almost cool after the searing heat of midday. This relative relief allows for a final burst of intensive labor, but your body's reserves have been depleted to levels that make every movement an act of will rather than physical capability. Your muscles tremble with fatigue. Your vision occasionally blurs from dehydration despite consuming every drop of water you've been allocated. And your hands are raw and bleeding from constant contact with rough stone and splintered wood. The evening work assignment involves the most precision-demanding tasks of the entire day, final positioning and alignment of blocks that have been roughly placed during the afternoon. This work requires steady hands, clear vision, and precise judgment, all of which have been compromised by the day's accumulated stress and exhaustion. Yet the standards remain absolute because any deviation from perfect alignment will compound into major structural problems as the pyramid grows higher. The alignment work uses measurement techniques that demonstrate the sophisticated mathematical knowledge of Egyptian engineers while requiring implementation by workers who are operating at the limits of human endurance. Long ropes, marked with precise intervals, serve as measuring devices, but these ropes must be held taut by workers whose hands shake with fatigue. Wooden set squares must be positioned exactly, but the workers holding them are struggling to maintain steady grips on tools, slick with sweat and blood. The precision required becomes almost surreal when considered in the context of working conditions that would be considered inhumane by any modern standard. Blocks must be positioned with tolerances measured in fractions of inches while workers suffer from heat exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition, and injuries that would sideline contemporary construction workers for weeks. The fact that this precision is consistently achieved represents perhaps the greatest demonstration of human determination and skill in recorded history. The evening light creates additional challenges as shadows shift across the work surface, making it difficult to see the fine details that determine whether blocks are properly aligned. Workers must compensate for changing lighting conditions while maintaining accuracy that allows no margin for error. Oil lamps and torches provide some additional illumination, but these create their own hazards as open flames near workers weakened by exhaustion increase the risk of serious burns. The final quotas for daily production must be met regardless of working conditions or worker fatigue because the construction schedule allows no flexibility for delays or reduced productivity. Each work gang has specific targets for blocks placed, ramp sections completed, or tools maintained. And failure to meet these targets results in punishment that can include reduced food rations, assignment to more dangerous work details, or even expulsion from the project. The pressure to meet quotas creates a work environment where safety considerations must be balanced against productivity demands in ways that would horrify modern safety professionals. Workers take risks they would normally avoid because falling behind schedule threatens their family's survival more than the possibility of workplace injury. This dynamic results in accident rates that are horrifying by contemporary standards, but were considered acceptable given the economic and political realities of ancient Egypt. The teamwork required to meet evening quotas while working under extreme fatigue demonstrates human cooperation at levels rarely seen in modern workplace environments. Workers support each other through shared suffering, covering for teammates who are approaching collapse and sharing resources like water and food, despite having barely enough for their own survival. These bonds of mutual support are literally matters of life and death in an environment where individual failure can result in catastrophic consequences for entire teams. The supervisory staff faces their own challenges during the evening hours as they must balance productivity demands against worker welfare in ways that require sophisticated understanding of human limitations. Pushing workers too hard results in increased accidents, reduced quality, and potential worker revolts that could disrupt the entire project. But allowing reduced productivity threatens the construction schedule and could result in their own punishment by higher authorities. The food distribution during evening hours provides the final meal of the day, but this meal must be consumed quickly during brief breaks that cannot be extended without falling behind schedule. The food quality has deteriorated throughout the day as bread becomes staler, vegetables wilt in the heat, and beer turns increasingly sour. Workers must force themselves to eat food that has become unappetizing while their stomachs are nauseated by exhaustion and heat stress. The water situation becomes increasingly critical during evening hours as workers accumulated dehydration reaches dangerous levels despite consuming every drop allocated to them. The human body cannot process water fast enough to replace what is lost through sweat in this environment. So workers are constantly operating in a state of dehydration that impairs physical and mental performance while increasing the risk of heat-related illness. The tool maintenance that continues throughout the evening requires skills that are difficult to maintain while suffering from exhaustion that affects fine motor control and visual acuity. Sharpening copper chisels to the precise angles required for effective stonework becomes increasingly challenging as workers' hands shake with fatigue. Repairing wooden tools requires attention to detail that is difficult to maintain when concentration is impaired by physical stress as the workday approaches its end. The accumulated fatigue creates conditions where even simple tasks become dangerous. Workers stumble over obstacles they would normally navigate easily. Tools slip from hands that can no longer maintain secure grips. Communication becomes less effective as exhaustion impairs speech and hearing. The risk of accidents increases. Just when workers are least capable of responding effectively to dangerous situations. The sunset that marks the end of the official workday does not signal immediate rest for pyramid workers. Tools must be collected, counted, and secured. Work areas must be cleaned and prepared for the next day's labor. Injured workers must receive whatever medical attention is available. The social hierarchy that governs pyramid construction requires that these end-of-day responsibilities be completed regardless of worker exhaustion. The walk back to the workers' quarters reveals the true cost of pyramid construction on the human beings who make it possible. Thousands of men move slowly across the desert like wounded soldiers retreating from a battlefield, supporting each other and carrying teammates who are too exhausted to walk unassisted. The mortality rate among pyramid workers is high enough that not everyone who began the day's work will be present for tomorrow's labor. The workers' quarters themselves would shock modern people with their primitive conditions and overcrowding. Thousands of men are housed in simple mud brick structures that provide minimal protection from the elements and no privacy or personal space. Sanitation facilities are rudimentary at best, creating health hazards that contribute to the high illness and death rates among the workforce. Yet somehow, against all odds and despite conditions that would be considered impossible by contemporary standards, the work continues day after day, year after year, until the pyramid reaches completion. The human cost is enormous. Thousands of workers die or are permanently disabled during construction. But the result is a monument that will stand for thousands of years as testimony to what human beings can accomplish when they are willing to sacrifice everything for a shared goal. As you collapse onto your sleeping mat after consuming the evening meal and completing the day's final responsibilities, your last conscious thought is that tomorrow you will wake up and do it all again. And somehow, despite everything your body has endured today, you will find the strength to continue because the alternative failure to complete. Pharaoh's pyramid is literally unthinkable in the religious and social context that governs your world as consciousness fades after this devastating day of labor. It's important to understand that your experience is not exceptional, but represents the daily reality for thousands of workers over the 20-year construction period required. To complete the Great Pyramid, the human cost of this achievement is staggering when calculated across the entire project. Conservative estimates suggest that over 2,000 workers died during construction, with thousands more suffering permanent disabilities that would affect them for the rest of their considerably shortened lives. The mortality rate among pyramid workers was roughly 10 times higher than the general population, making pyramid construction one of the most dangerous occupations in the ancient world. Workers died from heat stroke, construction accidents, respiratory diseases caused by limestone dust, infections from untreated wounds, and simple exhaustion that pushed their bodies beyond the limits of human endurance. The fact that enough workers survived to complete the project represents a triumph of human determination over almost impossible odds. Modern analysis of worker remains found near pyramid sites reveals the physical toll that this labor exacted on human bodies. Skeletal evidence shows extensive damage to spines and joints from constant heavy lifting. Teeth are worn to stumps from consuming bread filled with sand particles. Bones show signs of multiple fractures that healed poorly due to inadequate medical care. Life expectancy for pyramid workers was roughly 35 years, compared to 45 years for the general population. Yet the workers who built the pyramids were not slaves driven by whips and chains. As popular mythology suggests, they were free Egyptian citizens performing corvée labor as a form of taxation. And archaeological evidence suggests they took considerable pride in their work. Graffiti found inside pyramid passages includes team names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, suggesting an esprit de corps that helped workers endure impossible conditions. The organizational achievement represented by pyramid construction rivals the engineering accomplishment in its complexity and sophistication, coordinating 20,000 workers, performing hundreds of different specialized tasks required administrative skills that wouldn't be matched again until the industrial age. The logistics of feeding, housing, and providing medical care for this workforce in the middle of the desert represented a supply chain management challenge that pushed ancient Egyptian civilization to its limits. The precision achieved by these exhausted, poorly equipped workers using primitive tools remains one of the most remarkable demonstrations of human capability in recorded history. The Great Pyramid was the tallest building in the world for over 3,800 years, and its geometric accuracy wasn't surpassed until the development of modern construction techniques in the 20th century. This precision was accomplished by human hands and eyes, guided by mathematical knowledge and sustained by determination that defies modern understanding. The religious motivation that made such sacrifice possible cannot be separated from the practical achievement. Workers genuinely believed that building Pharaoh's eternal resting place was not only a civic duty, but a religious obligation that would benefit them in the afterlife. This spiritual framework provided meaning that helped transform unbearable suffering into sacred service, making it possible for human beings to endure conditions that would otherwise be completely intolerable. The legacy of pyramid construction extends far beyond the monuments themselves. The administrative techniques developed to manage these projects became the foundation of Egyptian governmental organization. The engineering knowledge gained through pyramid building enabled later architectural achievements throughout Egyptian civilization. The mathematical and astronomical observations required for pyramid construction advanced Egyptian scientific knowledge in ways that influenced Greek and Roman scholarship centuries later. Modern attempts to replicate pyramid construction techniques using period-appropriate tools and methods have consistently failed to achieve the productivity and precision that ancient Egyptian workers accomplished routinely. Contemporary workers, despite being better fed, better rested, and protected by extensive safety measures, cannot match the output of pyramid builders who labored under conditions that would be considered torture by modern standards. This comparison reveals something profound about human adaptability and the relationship between necessity and capability. When survival and meaning converge around a shared goal, human beings can accomplish feats that seem impossible under normal circumstances. The pyramid builders developed physical and psychological resilience that enabled them to function effectively under stress levels that would incapacitate contemporary workers within hours. The economic impact of pyramid construction on ancient Egyptian society was enormous, requiring mobilization of resources and labor on a scale that transformed the entire civilization. The projects drove innovations in quarrying, transportation, construction techniques, and project management that had lasting effects on Egyptian capability and productivity. The massive investment in pyramid construction also created economic networks and trade relationships that enhanced Egyptian prosperity for centuries. As you drift off to sleep on your simple mat, surrounded by thousands of other exhausted workers who will face the same brutal routine tomorrow, you are part of an achievement that will outlast every other human creation of your era. The pyramid you are building will still stand when the cities, armies, and empires of your time have been reduced to dust and archaeological fragments. Your suffering and sacrifice are creating something that will speak to human beings across thousands of years about what can be accomplished when people are willing to give everything for a goal larger than themselves. The workers who built the pyramids were not superhuman, but they were transformed by circumstances and beliefs that enabled them to transcend normal human limitations. Their achievement stands as permanent testimony to human potential when it is focused, organized, and sustained by shared purpose, powerful enough to make any sacrifice seem worthwhile. Sleep now, knowing that tomorrow will bring more of the same. Impossible labor, but also knowing that each day's work brings the eternal monument closer to completion, ensuring that your brief, difficult life will be remembered as long as human civilization endures. And so ends our journey through a single day in the life of a pyramid builder. One day among the thousands required to complete humanity's most enduring monument. If this exploration of ancient human endurance has given you new appreciation for modern comforts and working conditions, consider subscribing for more glimpses into history's most challenging lives. Tomorrow night, we'll visit another time and place where survival required strength and determination that modern people can barely imagine.